Welcome to MedEvidence, where we help you navigate the truth behind medical research with unbiased, evidence-proven facts. Hosted by cardiologist and top medical researcher, Dr. Michael Koren.
Hello, I'm Dr. Michael Koren, the executive editor of MedEvidence. And we have a really special podcast today. I always enjoy it when I have a kindred spirit on with me. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Doug Denham, who is a clinical investigator, a fellow CPI, and he's going to explain what that means. It's a very special designation that he and I share. And truly somebody who has been involved in this industry like I have for many years and has tremendous insights based on that experience. So Doug, welcome to MedEvidence.
Well, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So Doug works out of San Antonio, Texas, and he's part of a site there that's really one of the premier sites in the entire country. A great example of an organically developed site that has become really one of the pivotal places where great clinical research is done. And I had the privilege of visiting you just a little while ago, and I was super impressed by your facility. Magnificent 20,000 square feet, covers everything from phase 1 through phase 4. You name it, you're doing it. And just super impressive. And I also felt good and felt redemption when I saw you run around just as much as I do day to day. We're not desk workers. We're not sitting around looking at our emails. We're out there hands on. So I truly enjoyed seeing that. So thank you for inviting me out to your facility. And now it's my chance to invite you into our virtual facility. So
All right, well, I appreciate that.
So, Doug, we're going to talk today about the challenges of retention in clinical trials. But before we get into that detail, tell us and the audience a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a board-certified family medicine doctor. I was in private practice for probably about 20 years and then started doing research about 2006 and have been doing it full-time probably since about 2010. I had a nursing home practice at that time on the side that allowed me to kind of keep my fingers in that side of medicine. But have closed the practice down now and doing this completely full time. So it's a nice transition, I think, for me. I still have the patient contact like I did with the clinic, but I'm also on cutting edge of medicine. We're seeing the new drugs as they come out, new devices. So it's exciting and it's enjoyable. Pace is a little bit better, but still busy. Mm-hmm. Enjoy it.
Beautiful. Now, so one of the marks of somebody that's really dedicated to being a principal investigator is this CPI designation. Do you want to explain that to the audience?
Certified Principal Investigator, and it's a certification where you have to have a certain amount of experience and training to reach that, and you have to take a test and to show that you know all these things. And it's not just about seeing the patient and adjusting their medicines and those kinds of things. You have to know all the other aspects of research, the regulatory stuff, the federal stuff, all those kinds of things, the good clinical practices, how to take care of the patients and your responsibilities as an investigator with your patients. So I think it gave me a little more in-depth appreciation for what my role as an investigator is, and also the responsibilities that are there that I think some people may not really understand until they kind of dig into it a little bit more.
And you have to take a board exam and pass a pretty long board exam to become a CPI, a Certified Principal Investigator. And I recall it was it was reasonably challenging. It wasn't trivial in terms of things we're asked to know.
No, yeah, they want to make sure you know what you're doing with in terms of conducting a study and trial and those things, your responsibilities.
So what's interesting is that the CPI exam gets into a lot of elements of good clinical practices, or GCP, which is part of federal law. And those are the kind of things that investigators need to know very well. For example, how to report an adverse event, what's a serious adverse events, what's a SUSAR, a unsuspected serious adverse reaction. So all these kind of alphabet soup things that we learn over time, and it's quite extensive. But the one thing that really doesn't get covered, which is a pretty big area in these CPI exams, is how to approach a patient about clinical research and how to keep people engaged in clinical research. So
Yes.
you mentioned off air that you are very interested in obesity and just came back from an obesity conference. So maybe share a few things about the obesity conference, and then let's talk about some of the challenges of doing obesity research.
So yeah, the conference was really interesting. It has folks from around the country and around the world there, and they're not just physicians treating obese patients. They're the people doing the bench research and doing all these things, the preclinical animal studies and mapping, and it was a very in-depth conference, and I felt very excited. Some of the things I learned from it, but there's a lot of new medications that they're looking at, in addition to the big ones right now. The GLP-1s are the god, but there's other stuff coming down the pike that may be just as effective without some of the side effects and issues that we see with the GLP-1s.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of good things out there. So there'll be lots of stuff on the coming at us in the next year or two that it'll be interesting to do,
right,
study wise.
Yeah. So the GLP-1 analogs or agonists are such a fascinating class of drugs. As you recall, they were originally developed for diabetes, and these are drugs like Ozempic or Mounjaro, the two most common in the U.S. And these drugs were originally developed for diabetes. And the FDA was concerned that there were safety issues for cardiovascular patients. So I remember doing my first GLP-1 agonist as a cardiologist, and people were looking at me as like, why is a cardiologist in the room for this drug for diabetes? And at that point, we didn't know about the weight loss properties particularly, but we did know that these drugs lowered glucose. But the FDA was concerned that maybe some of these drugs would have unintended consequences that would affect cardiovascular health. So lo and behold, we do these studies with these drugs, and these were long-term outcome studies that required people to stay in the study over a period of time. And not only do we find that they were safe for cardiovascular patients, but we actually found that we were reducing cardiovascular events and lowering their blood pressure and lowering their cholesterol in addition to losing weight. So it's a great example of unintended consequences. Were you involved in some of those studies back in the day?
We did some of the earlier ones too. Yeah. They're challenging. Just because, like you said, they're longer studies than the normal studies that we run. So it's a whole new issue to deal with when you're doing those kinds of trials.
Okay.
Keeping the patients involved for 3-4 years sometimes.
Absolutely. So now I'm going to ask you a question that's not on the board exam. And I think you're up for the task. All right?
All right.
All right. So you're an investigator working in maybe San Antonio, Texas, maybe, for example, and you're involved in a study, and somebody in your community is really excited to get involved in this study because it involves a GLP-1 drug. And he's in the study for 6 months, and he hasn't lost any weight. But this is a 3-year outcome study. And this guy is really getting irritated with you, and he's saying, hey, I wanted to do this to lose weight, and I'm not making any progress. He says, Doc, I think maybe I want out of this study. How do you approach somebody like that? That's a challenge.
It is a challenge, yeah. So at the beginning of the trial, I spend a lot of time talking with the patients before we even get them into the trial, talking with them about outcome trials, and how this is going to be a long-term process. It may have it has a placebo in it. I won't know whether you're getting the real drug. You won't know whether you're getting the real drug. So I explained to them that, when we're in these kinds of trials, part of the most important part of the trial is being able to, at the end of the trial, still be involved with the trial, because that's they have to have a certain number of people finish the trial to get realistic
data.
and statistical information. Yeah. So and that's what our job is ultimately. That's what their job is as the participant in the trial with us. So we start out that way, and I asked them to be honest with me. Do you think you can do that? Even if you don't, if it turns out you're not experiencing weight loss, you're still going to be getting a lot of benefits. You're going to be seeing me or somebody in our staff on a fairly regular basis, looking at your health. We're going to be doing lab work to see how things are going. Also, part of these trials, generally, there's some dietary and lifestyle training that you're doing with them. So I encourage them that these are all important parts of maintaining your weight throughout the trial and at the end of the trial, because at the end of the trial, whether you were on it or not, we're going to take it away from you and you're going to be stuck out there. And if you haven't learned something during the trial about how to eat better and exercise and do those lifestyle modifications, you're going to go right back to where you started, and then you're right where you started.
Yeah.
So we try to get them in there and try to sort through them that way. Our staff is really good. Our coordinators and folks like that, they're also very good about keeping in contact with them and encouraging them. Most of the time, the sponsors will have some strategies that they have as part of the trial, where they're periodically giving them water bottles and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's just incentives.
Tchotchkes, I think, is the technical term for that.
Yeah. So, and some patients really enjoy those things. But I think like I say, and then at each visit, while we're talking, we deal with some of those issues. I tell folks, particularly in a weight loss trial, I said, everybody responds differently to the medication. So you may be one of those non-responders or slow responders, and it's just going to take a time. When you look at some of the early trials with these things, I mean, it took for like semaglutide, it took some of these people to really start losing appreciable weight 24, 26 weeks out into the study.
Right.
So, it's kind of hard to, if you're not dropping 10 pounds in the first week, that's not something to be worried about.
Right. And semaglutide is Ozempic for those people not familiar with it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
So it's kind of an ongoing process. Inevitably you do reach that point where they're really kind of like, I'm not seeing what I want to see. And I think exploring kind of, again, what were your expectations? What goals did you have maybe that, we didn't talk about before that I wasn't aware of, about the amount of weight you're going to have? Was it realistic to begin with? And then we'll talk a little bit more about, like I said, the altruistic aspect of doing studies is, you may not get benefit out of this trial, but if you're here helping us find the answers to these questions, you're doing something. You're giving back to the community and to the world.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point.
And so, try to encourage them that way. Some, there are those individuals who just kind of once they lock themselves down and they're not going to do that. Then I think the other alternative that, I will explore with them is, okay, you're 2 years into the study. We've got another year to go. You're tired of coming in and doing all those things. You're tired of taking medicine that you don't think is helpful for you. Let's do this. Will you stay in the trial just as a participant? We may we'll still have you come in for visits to draw blood and things like that. You'll still get your stipend for doing those things. If you're willing to do that. If you don't want to do that at all, I need you to stay in the trial and show up on the last day that would have been your last day of the trial, just for the end of study medication or checkups and things like that, just so we can close out the trial. And that helps the sponsor in terms of the number of people that participated and completed the trial.
Right.
So
and the science, of course, helps the science. Yes.
Yeah, I think so. So it's an in-depth. It's a challenge sometimes. Like I said, but it is amazing to me how many people just kind of, I think, in addition to the trial, they're getting that social contact with our staff and in our facility. The people, I laugh sometimes. I think the girls out front at the front desk receptionists, they know the patients better than I do because they spend more time talking to them, and they know about their families and grandbabies
Sure.
and all these other crazy things. Sometimes it's interesting that way. But so I think there are other benefits that we try to explore too with them about participating, continuing their participation.
Right. So you hit on such an important thing, which is the engagement piece, is that a lot of our patients find tremendous value in the engagement. They don't get that during traditional medical interactions anymore, and they love that. And a good investigator and a good coordinator will figure out what drives the patient to come in, whether or not just chit-chat about what's going on in their life or little tidbits about what you learned at the latest conference. People seem to love that. Or you're looking at their whole health record. So you may say, hey, did you look to see what's going on with this particular problem? I noticed that while you're here, you're a little short of breath. Have you had that checked out? or we did an EKG as part of this, and it's nothing major, but there's a little something here that maybe requires a little bit of attention. I can help you follow through on that, or just lifestyle stuff. So I'm a big fish eater, for example, and I like to tout all the benefits of fish. So people love that kind of engagement, and I'm a big fan of halibut. Do you like halibut?
I've had halibut, yeah, but I wouldn't say it's my choice.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to prepare you my special mustard-based halibut. You're going to love it.
Ooh, that
anyhow,
sounds very good. All right.
But these are things that patients really enjoy. They like that interaction, and certainly I think a lot of our patients would benefit from getting some of the processed foods out of their diet and more healthy foods and foods that, quite frankly, will help them lose weight if they're just a little bit more careful about what they put in their mouths.
Right.
So that interaction goes a long, long way. And then the other thing that you kind of alluded to, which is super interesting, is that you got to keep them in, especially for that primary endpoint, which may be how they're doing at year 1, 2, or 3. And be mindful of that as an investigator and make sure the patients understand that the scientific validity of the study requires them to be there for that visit. So even if they choose not to take the investigational product, it's still important that they kind of do their thing and come in, and especially for those key endpoint visits.
Right. Yeah, it is. You hate the patient that just disappears into the sunset and you never hear no word from them, and suddenly they stop answering the phone calls and not answering. Yeah, that's a real problem. So.
Yeah. So we certainly try to do that. And then I know your experience with this, but from a sponsor perspective, we encourage the sponsors to provide open label treatment for a lot of these patients after they complete the blinded part of the study. Right. It's a huge driver for people to be compliant with the protocols and ultimately to have a positive perception of the clinical research process. Have you had a success with that in the past?
Yeah. I think, you're right. I will even ask that question sometimes, when as the study's starting, when we're talking with them about that is there, are we going to have a chance where the patient will be unblinded and actually be on product for, a certain period of time so they can get that benefit from it. So, I think those studies probably are easier to keep people in than not, so, but some of the sponsors aren't receptive to that, unfortunately, too. So,
absolutely. Well, let's take a quick break, and then I want to delve into cardiovascular outcome studies with you. As a cardiologist, I do lots of those. I know you've done plenty of them during the course of your career, and they also present some challenges in terms of retention, and we'll dig into that in just a moment.
To continue watching this podcast episode, head over to medevidence.com.